Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the marvelous youngster, Kevin Cunningham, a.k.a. Kid Cunny on Twitter. What's going on today, buddy?
Not too much. Not the no havoc like you're going through, Troy, as far as what I hear before the show.
Well, it's just the driving. I mean, those that listen in know that I record the show when I drive home, and these people, they're crazy. Youngster, they're crazy. You were in Wisconsin for part of your life. You know that the worst thing to do in any kind of weather is to ride on your brake. Just go, and the roads aren't even bad. It's a drifting snow. It's like a sideways snow that's not even staying on the road. The roads are fine. But, God, everybody's white-knuckling it on the highway. It's like, just drive. Just drive. I understand it's below freezing, but the roads are fine. The roads are fine. Then there's a snowplow in the middle lane just driving. And you know, Kevin, the snowplow can't go very fast. People aren't passing the snowplow. You can pass a snowplow if they're not plowing. Oh, but I'm ready for the show. I'm ready. I'm ready. I'm ready to rock and roll.
That's good to hear. I am as well. Talking about basketball now that football is completely done with. I thought there was something other than Big Ten basketball that I wanted to mention on this show, and of course I can't think of it right now. But in any case, if it comes to me, it might have to do with football. It might not. I don't really remember. But in any case, we will go ahead with basketball. There was certainly some interesting things, and I guess when you're talking about 14 different teams in the Big Ten, there are going to be things to talk about. Each and every single week, it's not just Michigan State dominating, Purdue dominating, Illinois and Iowa playing like crap, and the middle just beating up on each other. Every week there's going to be some upsets, and especially in the top 25. We can see that. Is there anything else, Troy, before I get into the top 25, mainly regarding the Big Ten, that you wanted to mention?
No, nothing at all. I mean, we're going to talk basketball today, but I don't want to forget there are other sports. This is a Big Ten show, not just Big Ten basketball, but there are other Big Ten sports going on. Sorry we're not covering them today. We may later in the year. A little volleyball going on, some hockey action going on. We'll touch on those things as we find relevant stories that relate to them and maybe keep you up to date on the standings. But I know primarily most people listening to this show want to hear about Big Ten basketball. So I don't have anything else that's relevant to the Big Ten right now, Kevin. Let's get into the top 25.
Before that, and I actually just remembered what I wanted to talk about. Not that it's this, crazy topic that we're going to talk about for more than 1 minute, but Iowa wrestler, yes, wrestling going on right now. Like Troy said, there are other sports going on. We tend to talk about the sports in general that most people want to hear about, that they will click on. Not that Iowa wrestling is not as important or more important or less important than men's basketball, men's football, whatever the case is. We talk about what people want to hear. Troy can talk for hours about hockey, and we don't really cover Big Ten hockey. We don't really, well, especially on this show, cover the NHL. We'll talk about the NHL and some of the other sports we do, but as long as football is going on, that basically trumps everything. Basketball is pretty much second fiddle, and then baseball kind of finds its way behind that. We tailor our show to what you guys want to hear. Find us on Twitter at youngsteroldman. That's the Twitter handle for the show. If you want us to talk more about Iowa wrestling, for example, just wrestling as a whole, hockey as a whole, whatever it is, let us know. I mean, if we get enough feedback that people want to hear about other sports outside of football and basketball for the most part, and again, like when baseball was going on, we talked a bit about Big Ten baseball for a couple of shows. But primarily football and basketball just trump everything else. I mean, that's just majority wins. That's what's going to get the most interest in our show. And Troy and I like talking about football and basketball primarily, so that's what we do. But if other people want to hear about other sports, again, find us on Twitter at youngsteroldman. You can find me personally at KIDCUNI. You can follow Troy at TroyRobert967. But the one thing I wanted to mention, Iowa freshman wrestler Spencer Lee was the number 1 recruit in wrestling this past year, and Iowa kind of pulled his red shirt, and he's basically, in high school, he lost 1 match, and it was his final match his senior year because I believe he was wrestling on a torn ACL. That was the only time he lost a match in high school. So, again, he was the number 1 wrestler coming into this year. Iowa was redshirting him for a while, then they pulled it, and he's just been dominating ever since. So I just wanted to mention the name Spencer Lee, the number 1 wrestling recruit who's at Iowa right now. At least from what I see 20 hours ago, according to Flow Wrestling, Iowa was ranked number 5 in the country. Spencer Lee dominated high school, was the number 1 recruit. He's dominating. I know his first match came against a guy against Michigan State who was like 17-3 on the year. And then in the first period, like not even a minute in, I don't think it was, he got a pin in his first ever collegiate match. And that was against a really good wrestler who was either a junior or senior. But in any case, just a name to remember if we're talking about like Olympics, in a few years. And, Ohio State wrestling has had a guy in particular who has done well in the Olympics, like win a gold medal. So Iowa wrestling, Spencer Lee, just a name to remember. And if we ever talk about wrestling in the future, I'm sure we'll bring up his name. But getting into college basketball now for the next however long, top 25 changes every single Monday. We do this show on Mondays. So luckily for us, we get the fresh scoop on the top 25 to deliver to you guys. And Villanova is number 1. Virginia is number 2. I don't go through the whole top 25, but Purdue is now number 3. After going 2-0 a week ago, they absolutely smashed Minnesota, who I thought was the 3rd best team in the Big Ten. Basically coming into this year, if not the 2nd best team, I basically knew that Michigan State would be the juggernaut. That hasn't necessarily been the case even to this point. Purdue has been that juggernaut to this point. But in any case, I thought Minnesota would kind of battle with Purdue and maybe lose to Purdue in the Big Ten standings race, but be 3rd. I thought really highly of Minnesota coming in. They're now 2-4 in conference play. Purdue crushed them. They're the number 3 team in the country right now. So Purdue would be a 1 seed if March Madness started today. Oklahoma number 4, Duke 5, West Virginia 6, Wichita State, Texas Tech, and then you got I can't even say the name, Michigan State at number 9. That's the lowest I believe Michigan State has been this year is number 9. Even when they lost to Duke early in the year, they were down to like 4 or 5, but now down to 9 after a loss they suffered this past week, which again we'll go over. But other than that, past Purdue 3, Michigan State 9. Couple newcomers in the top 25, Ohio State, and rightfully so, at number 22, and Michigan, also rightfully so, coming in at number 23. Ohio State's been doing damage in the Big Ten. They're 6-0 in the Big Ten, which is incredible after what happened a year ago, getting a new coach. But Michigan also getting an upset over Michigan State. Like I said before, we'll talk about that more in depth as the show goes on. But Michigan also 15-4 overall with Ohio State, number 23 in the country. And as far as others receiving votes, I'm looking now, and there is nothing in the Big Ten. But so Purdue 3, Michigan State 9, and then you got a couple newbies in Ohio State 22, Michigan 23. What are your thoughts on that, Troy?
Yeah, it's nice to see some teams finally climbing up in there because you hit it on the head before you started. A couple of teams kind of pooing the bed there that we thought were going to do better, and then the middle of the pack beating each other up. We talked about it on the show, I believe, last week. Is that going to hurt the Big Ten when it comes to Selection Sunday? And we both think it will. Because when you look at anything outside of Michigan State and Purdue, you're kind of seeing it. Ohio State, it's an anomaly. And if they can keep this wave going, good for them. But I didn't expect it. I still think they're a middle-of-the-pack team, maybe catching some breaks here and there. They're playing good basketball. Still a lot to go, but I'm still going to put them in the middle of the pack. I'm not going to put them up there with Purdue and Michigan State. But everybody else below that, they're just going to kind of beat each other up, and anybody can beat anybody on any given day, which 2 things will happen. Record-wise, not going to give you a great record, and therefore you're not going to be ranked as easy. Good for Ohio State, good for Michigan. Michigan got a huge win. Like you said, we'll talk about it in a little bit. But at the end of the day, Kevin, rankings to me mean absolutely nothing. It's nice to see that you're recognized, but is Michigan really the ninth best team, or Michigan State the ninth best team in the country based on the way they're playing? Maybe. But if the tournament started today, I'd probably take them into the Final Four.
Yeah.
So to me, you can put a number next to a team and say, this team is ranked 20th, this team is ranked 14th. That's great. It's all good. You got to have some kind of ranking system, I guess. But to me, nothing matters until March. You have to win. Don't get me wrong, because you have to make the tournament. So the rankings can play a little part in that. But at the end of the day, the selection committee is going to be the selection committee. They're going to look at, where are you at now? Where are you in the month of February? How'd you do in your last 10? Are you playing good basketball right now? Are you a tournament team? So an AP pool. Yeah, that's the way my day's been going. It's an AP pool now. An AP pool in the middle of January, to me, Kevin, means absolutely nothing. How are you going to be playing in about 1 month? That's my thought. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, and I've said I would reference this throughout the year, and I will keep referencing it. It's not even necessarily about how you're playing in February, late February, March in your conference tournament. We have seen conference tournament winners go on to do jack squat. We have seen North Carolina get bounced in the second round, third round of the ACC tournament and win a national title. We've seen South Carolina go 3-9 in the last 12 going into the March Madness tournament a year ago. They knock off Duke. They go on a run. And that's going 3-9 in your last 12 games going into the NCAA tournament. You've got to be able to be a good team. And South Carolina was able. They were a junior, senior-laden team who played real defense and could hit shots. And so did that happen for the last 12 games going into the tournament? No. But they were, again, an experienced group who could lock down on D when they needed to, and they did that for a 3-4 game stretch and made a run in March Madness. What their ranking was, I highly doubt they were even ranked because they were a 10 seed, I believe, in the NCAA tournament. So, you don't even have to be playing great necessarily. You've just got to pull off a couple wins each weekend, and you just keep advancing. That's all it is. That's the cliche of survive and advance. But having typically juniors and seniors leading your team, guard play really helps a lot. Just because they have the ball in their hands more often. That to me is what matters. Being healthy, that hurt Minnesota a year ago. So a lot of different things matter. But a ranking next to your name right now, throw it out the window. And this is just like football too, where everyone treats the AP poll like a Bible, basically, up until the college football playoff releases their rankings, their ranking system for the last 4 or 5 weeks before they actually choose the Final Four for the college football playoff. But after, once the college football playoff committee has their rankings come out, the AP poll means literally nothing to any of the teams, to us. It just means nothing. And again, with this, I can say Purdue is going to be a 1 seed if March Madness started today, but the selection committee has nothing to do with the AP poll. They could think Purdue's the 5th best team. And
we're going to talk about this in a little bit, youngster, but I'll tell you what, Purdue right now to me is the best team in the country. The way they're playing, they're the best team in the country. And we thought they'd be a good team this year. But watching them play, they are, in my mind right now, in the middle of January, they're better than Michigan State in the conference. And I think, if they played right now, Michigan State's still going to give them a game. But all of a sudden, you look at these rankings and say, whoa, Purdue's way better. But I agree that Purdue is playing better than Michigan State right now, but who knows when the tournament starts. It's a Tom Izzo coach team, and it's a long basketball season. Very rare do you find an undefeated basketball champion. Has there ever been one? in men's basketball, Kevin? I can't recall.
There was, I'll look it up right now to be sure. But there
may have been one. I'm not talking way back in the UCLA days when there were 16 teams in the tournament. I mean, I'm talking modern day. So I guess I should preface myself. But I guess in my life, well, not even my lifetime. I can't recall one. Maybe there was one.
Yeah, that 78-79 Indiana State Larry Bird team was the last. And then you had Indiana do it a couple times in the 70s after UCLA was doing it in the early 70s. Since the 70s, though, I don't think it's
but there wasn't even 64 teams in the whole country at that time. I mean, what was the tournament, like 16 teams? I really believe it was. I didn't mean to get off on a tangent there, but I just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, since the 70s, it hasn't happened. So, it's been over 30 years, over 40 years, I think. And
I don't think you're ever going to see it again. Not in men's basketball. I truly believe that if you do, you've got a very special team. I mean, you have to have a very special team to go through a whole season undefeated, then get through the tournament. I mean, that in itself is a hard task. So I don't think you're ever going to see it again.
Yeah, maybe not. There is a lot more parity than people think. And, we let 68 teams into the tournament each year, and yet every year there's a double-digit seed that makes it to basically the Elite Eight. I mean, they pull off upset after upset after upset. So, even for a powerful one seed, I mean, how many times do one seeds make the Final Four? It's usually you get like 2 in there, and then you'll have like a 2 seed and like a 4 seed. That's your typical Final Four. There have been years with no 1 seeds. There have been years with 3 of them. I think there's been once or twice where all 4 1 seeds have made it. But that's me just off the top of my head. I could be incorrect in that thinking, but it basically never happens. Even with 3 1 seeds, it's rare. So too much parity in college basketball, in my opinion. Going into this year, we knew Michigan State was a juggernaut. I was under the assumption that Michigan State was the best team in the country and would win the whole thing. But I knew, and you knew, Troy, that they weren't going to go undefeated. I mean, even in Big Ten play alone, you've got so many games. And
well, I did ask you that question on the preview show. I did ask you that. Could they do it? And boy, we're just a few games in, and they're nowhere close to undefeated. They're more defeated than not. They got more. They actually have more losses right now, Kevin, than I thought they would have. But it goes to show you got to come play. And this Big Ten conference is a good one. And here's the thing. I know we got off our script now, and that's okay. But you mentioned about the AP Top 25. And it's nice to see 2 more teams from the Big Ten get in here. Here's the problem, is that I think the Big Ten is a very good basketball conference, but nobody outside that follows the Big Ten on a daily basis is going to think it's dominant. For the fact that you do have a Northwestern team sitting, what are they, 10th place? We'll go over it in a little bit. Northwestern team that's very good, that can actually go out and play basketball, and when they decide to play, they're pretty good. You've got a Penn State team at 3-3 in the Big Ten. That, in my mind, is a good, solid basketball team. Not a dominant team, but a good team. And they're 3-3. But could they go beat a Michigan? Sure, they could beat a Michigan. I'm not going to go as far as to say they could beat Michigan State or Purdue right now. But you're talking about this Penn State team I just talked about beating a top 25 team. But next week, their record in the Big Ten could still be 4-4. So that's why I think when people are doing the AP poll, when people are looking at conferences, they're just looking at records. They're not looking at the actual quality of play that's going on. Because, again, you summed it up at the beginning of this show. Beating each other up in the middle of the pack. And the middle of the pack in the Big Ten is about 4 through 9. So you've got 7 teams or 6 teams that are going to be hovering in conference play right around 500, and then you got to add their cupcake schedule in that they had before, and hopefully they did well enough to have a good record at the end of the year. But in my opinion, Kevin, a team that goes 20-10 in overall in the Big Ten as an overall record is a pretty darn good team. That's all I have.
Yeah, we saw it a year ago where there were 4 different 10-8 teams in the Big Ten. Michigan, Northwestern, Michigan State, all 3 easily made the tournament, made it to the second round and beyond. All 3 of those did. And then there was another 10-8 team in Iowa. So if you barely go over 500, there's at least a solid shot that you're probably going to get into the tournament. Michigan State was 20-15 overall, and they made it to the second round. They were an 8 or 9 seed. They had no problem whatsoever getting in. Iowa 19-15, 10-8 in conference. That's where the line was drawn. But basically, I mean, if you win more Big Ten games than you lose, even if it's 1, even if it's 2, even if you only get to the second round of the Big Ten tournament, you're going to have a shot at making the NCAA tournament. So, and that was last year when the Big Ten was quote unquote down. This year there is certainly more parity at the top. There is certainly more viable teams when it comes to teams who can actually do damage. A year ago we were kind of uncertain as to where the Big Ten stood, and then a few teams got hot toward the end of the year. Unfortunately, again, for Minnesota, they suffered an injury, so they were only 6 deep going into the tournament.
I think there was a time, Kevin, we thought there was only going to be 5 Big Ten teams in that tournament last year. I'm trying to think back to the shows we did. For those that are listening in, that listen all the time, you know we've been doing the show for over a year. I think last year, Kevin, there was a week where we thought it was only 5 Big Ten teams that would be actual viable NCAA tournament teams. So it goes to show you that as the season goes on, you can get better, you can start playing basketball. But I think it also shows the respect that the selection committee has for the Big Ten. Those guys are a little bit different than the AP voters in my mind. They know what's going on. And I will say this. The selection committee, yeah, we scratch our head every once in a while, but I'm going to tell you this, Kevin. I think they get it right a lot more than they get it wrong. Yeah, could they do some different seeding and they leave some teams out? But I'll tell you what, I think those guys in that room pretty much know their basketball. I don't think they're just looking at scores all the time, because a lot of times I think they do get it right. Seeding-wise, yeah, but you got to remember, we're not behind those closed doors. Somebody may come in and say, hey, this team needs to be seeded 5th, but then there's a debate that goes on and say, no, they're an 8 seed. They're a 9 seed. And then the debate starts, and then you've got a minority with the guy that thinks this team is a 5, and then this guy that thinks they're an 8 sways other people, and they say, yeah, it's an 8. So I don't envy the job they do, but I think they do a decent job at times. I know people put them under scrutiny. I have too, but when I look at the overall picture of it and I actually step back from it, I think they do a pretty good job.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's always 1 or 2 teams where it's like, gee, that team should have got in. And yet, what? I mean, they were 22-13, went second in the Atlantic 10 and had a poor conference tournament, got bounced in the first round. And it's like, oh, that team's one of the best 68 teams. It's like, okay, so what? They would have been a 12 seed in a play-in game or an 11 seed at best. And how much damage would they have done? Like I said, there's probably 1 double-digit seed each year who makes it to like the Elite 8, not even some years. But like an Xavier a year ago, they were like an 11 seed, I think, and they made it to the Elite 8, and that's cool. But that's 1 double-digit seed a year, and that's, I mean, that's a team that just catches fire and has the ability. So I mean, does the selection committee get the best 68 teams each year? They never do, partially because you have to award conference winners automatic bids, but if you're having trouble sleeping at night because the committee didn't put in the 61st best team and they put in the 70th, then you've got issues. I mean, if that's the worst thing they're doing, and if, oh my God, Wisconsin should have been a 4 seed, not a 5 seed, once in a while it's like, wow, I thought they were seeded really low. Well, that's fine. I mean, prove that you deserved a better seed and go out and knock off Villanova in the second round. That's what Wisconsin did. By being underappreciated as an 8 or a 9, and they had the opportunity in front of them, and they seized it. And then the next week, they played Florida and lost in the Sweet 16. So, you can debate seeds here and there once in a while, a team once in a while getting left out. But, yeah, I mean, as a whole, these guys know what they're doing because that's a part of their job. I mean, this isn't a full-time thing that they do, unfortunately. But, yeah, 99% of the time, and I never have huge issues. I mean, even like a year ago, Wisconsin, you thought, most of the Big Ten followers thought that Wisconsin deserved a better seed. They proved it by beating Villanova. But, again, in the end, they lost to Florida in the Sweet 16, who was like a 5 seed, a 4 seed, whatever it was. So how dominant was Wisconsin a year ago? They were obviously capable of beating top-ranked teams, but were they deserving of a 2 or a 3? Probably not. So to me, I never have huge issues with what the selection committee does. Again, in a 68-team field, you can't have too many major issues. College football playoff, if you think Ohio State really was better than Bama or whatever, Ohio State's better than the third-ranked team, I mean, that I can understand having some issue with. But when there's 68 teams, I never have any real issues.
Neither do I. I just wanted to bring it up. So now that we got off track, let's get this train back on the track, and let's talk about some things going on in the Big Ten.
Yes, sounds good. So, Big Ten standings right now. On January 15th, as we were doing the show, we have Purdue at the top of the Big Ten, which has been the case for a while now. 17-2 overall, 6-0 in Big Ten play, 2-0 over the week. Over this past week, I should say. Ohio State at number 2, also 6-0 in Big Ten play, and we'll go through more of these teams in depth later. But Ohio State at number 2 also won 2-0. They're at 6-0, and then there's kind of a gap because Michigan State is third still from a week ago. They're still third. They split, went 1-1. They're 4-2 in conference play. So they're a couple games behind Purdue and Ohio State now in the Big Ten standings. Not that they can't catch those teams, certainly, but 2-game gap there, which there's a 2-game gap between Michigan State, who's third, Northwestern, who's 11th. There's also a 2-game gap from 2 to 3. So that's how tightly knit the middle of the Big Ten is. And there are no teams, well, I guess Illinois still hasn't won a game, but there's no other teams that are 2 games behind Northwestern. So, I mean, 1 game here, 1 game there can vault you, 4 or 5 spots. But Ohio State and Purdue have actually somewhat separated themselves in the fact that they are 2 games above the third best team in the Big Ten, at least according to the standings. Michigan also at 4-2. They're number 4 in the standings. Indiana is 5. They went 2-0 this past week. They're also 4-2 in the Big Ten standings. We're looking for these middle-of-the-pack teams in the Big Ten to stand out and separate themselves. And, is Indiana a tournament team? We didn't really know a week ago. Even now, after 2 wins, you can't be sure. But going 4-2 in the Big Ten, that certainly helps to get you to 10 wins in the Big Ten season, which, again, is a good starting point for building your case as one of the top 68 teams. So Indiana doing well this past week. They're number 5, Maryland number 6. They lost their only game. They're at 3-3. Penn State at 7. They're at 3-3. Nebraska at 8. They're in 3-3. Wisconsin at 9. They lost their only game. They're 2-3 in Big Ten play. Minnesota at number 10. 2-4 in Big Ten play. 0-2 this past week. Again, I thought they were the third best team in the Big Ten. Certainly not proving to be that right now. Northwestern at 11. I mean, those are 2 good teams. Troy, you brought up Northwestern before. I think Minnesota is a really good team. I think Northwestern has the capabilities of being a really good team. And they're 10th and 11th in the Big Ten right now. Both those teams are 2-4. And then you've got really the 3 bottom dwellers, in my opinion. Rutgers at 12, they're 1-5. Iowa at 13, 1-5. Illinois at 14, 0-5, the only winless team in the Big Ten in terms of Big Ten games. Rutgers is 11-8, Iowa's 10-9, Illinois is 10-8 overall. Those 3 teams, I'd be surprised if they made the NCAA tournament. Wisconsin at 9-9 overall. They've gotten a couple Big Ten wins, which helps, but both Troy and I, well, I guess you know, Troy, where my thought is on Wisconsin, and the listeners, if you've listened to the show in the past couple of weeks, know what Troy thinks of Wisconsin. They certainly have some work to do, and we don't see that work probably being done this season. But so, as a whole, those are the Big Ten standings: Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan State, Michigan, Indiana, Maryland at 6, Penn State 7, Nebraska, Wisconsin, Minnesota at 10, Northwestern 11, Rutgers 12, Iowa 13, Illinois 14.
It's just amazing, Kevin. Just amazing when you look at it and see teams that we thought, and that's why the world of sports is so wacky. You know, like I said, Northwestern could go out. They could go out tonight and play Michigan and beat Michigan.
Yeah.
Minnesota, too, has talent on that team. They just haven't put it together. So it sucks. I mean, basketball, a little longer season, you don't get as penalized like you do in football for losing a game. But it's, at some point, you got to start climbing up the hill. You know, I mentioned it. You've got to get enough wins to get into the tournament. You know, you look at Michigan now, Kevin, Minnesota. If they go 500 now in the Big Ten, what is their record, 2-4?
Yeah, they're 2-4.
So if they go 6-6 over their next 12, that puts them at 8-10. Probably not getting the tournament.
No.
So they've got some work to do. You know, you look at a Penn State who's a team that you and I thought, not a great team, not a bad team. They're a good little team. They've got some good, decent skill players. We like the way they play. If they finish their season at 6-6, it only puts them at 9-9. They've got to find a win or two there somewhere, Kevin. You know, you've got to win. I mean, you've talked about it. What it looks like as the bar to get in the tournament in the Big Ten, you've pretty much got to be about 10-8. And even at 10-8, that's no guarantee based on your overall record. So, you know, you look at these teams that are sitting around 500 at 3-3. Well, that's great, but you've got to find that little streak. You got to find that 4 or 5 game winning streak, and you've got to. You mentioned it. Separate yourself. Separate yourself from the pack. And right now, the middle of the pack is just not separating them. You know, you got your couple teams at the top, but that middle, no. I mean, a couple wins and Minnesota's all of a sudden up in like 5th or 6th. I mean, that's how close it is in that middle.
Yeah, no question about it. We'll talk about more Minnesota. We'll talk more Minnesota in a bit because they've got. We'll certainly talk about Purdue versus Minnesota this past week. I guess that's my next talking point is Purdue starting at the top of the conference. 17-2 overall, 6-0 in Big Ten play, 2-0 this past week. They went to Michigan on January 9th and won that game by 1 point. I did not see that game, unfortunately. But a few days later, they went to Minnesota and won 81-47. So they beat Minnesota, who I thought was the third best team in the Big Ten, by 34 points on the road. Okay. I texted Troy after the game that Purdue is absolutely playing better than Michigan State, and it's really not even close. That's how good Purdue looks. Shooting 40% from 3, shooting close to 50% from the field. They held Minnesota to 28% shooting from the field, 19% from 3. You can say those are anomalies, but Minnesota's 2-4 in conference play. The one thing that I have to say about Minnesota, Amir Coffey, who's a guard/forward for Minnesota, one of their key returnees. They had 4 key returnees coming back to this team from a year ago, which I thought was a pretty dangerous team. Coffey was one of them so far this year, averaging 31 minutes a game, which is the most on the team. He's played in 16 games, a.k.a. he's missed the last 2. He is out with an injury. It's a shoulder injury, and coach, Richard Pitino, said over a week ago that he's not going to be back anytime soon. My assumption is that he's going to be back eventually, but as of now, he's out for a while. That's been hurting them for sure. And then a day prior to the coach talking about Coffee, Reggie Lynch, the team center from a year ago, who at this point is the team's second leading rebounder behind Jordan Murphy, was averaging 10 and 8, also played in 16 games, so he's missed the last couple. Basically, this has hurt Minnesota. They weren't playing fantastic before, 10 days ago, as we're doing this show. But now, Reggie Lynch, indefinite ban. He's still on the team, though. What's going on with him is not an injury. He was found responsible for sexual misconduct toward a woman in April 2016, one of 3 women to accuse him of assault. That was a week ago. So he's still on the team because he's going through the whole appeal process, practicing, not playing. So they're without 2 of their top 4 main contributors from a year ago who are supposed to be big contributors this year, obviously. So that has hurt Minnesota for sure. But Purdue going to Minnesota with 2 of its superstars back from a year ago, and you add guys, a backup point guard like Isaiah Washington, who's a talented player. Also, Devontae Fitzgerald, a talented player coming off the bench. Minnesota's still a good team, in my opinion. They're just not playing like it. You add Coffey's injury, you add the stuff with Lynch. That's obviously hurt them. And if those guys aren't back soon, which it doesn't sound like they're going to be, again, like Troy said, you need to pile up the wins. You probably need to go 10 and 8 in conference. They're 2 and 4 as it is. So can they go 8 and 4 to close the year with Coffey out for a while, with Lynch out for who knows how long, if not for the rest of his college basketball career? I don't know what the answer is with this Minnesota team, but they have to get it going with their guards.
The answer is bad luck. Bad luck. They've got skill. They last year injuries, this year injury and suspensions. So it's a domino effect, Kevin. Happens to some people just have bad luck. Maybe Minnesota, maybe they have bad luck in the Big Ten. Because this was a team that was getting guys back from injury, and then all of a sudden you got an injury, and then you got a suspension. And we'll see what else happens to them as they move forward. But it's got to be derailing for that team.
Right.
Like you said, missing the last couple of games, I mean, now you're looking at guys that were very integral in what you wanted to do. Now they're out. Now somebody's thrust into another role, and people say, well, they got to step up. Well, I understand that. But in basketball, you've only got 5 players on the court, and some teams only go 8 deep. So when you take away 2 key components, and now you've got to insert guys somewhere, may not even be in the starting lineup. Okay, you move a guy that was the 6th man or the 7th guy into the starting lineup. Well, you still got to elevate 9 or 10 into that rotation. And when you elevate guys that were not in that rotation, it's going to take them time to get used to the routine. Sports are very much routine, Kevin. You can do the same things over and over, and your team has tendencies. So if you're an 8-deep team and you lose 2 guys, well, that puts a whole kibosh on everything you were doing, and now you've got to move other pieces around. And so I think Minnesota's trying to adjust right now and figure it out. It could be too late. If it takes them 2 or 3 more games to figure it out, Kevin, all of a sudden they could be sitting at like 3 and 5 or 3 and 6.
Yeah.
And be in real trouble of missing the tournament.
Yeah, no question about it. To me, if asking me right now, does Minnesota make the tournament, I'd say no, because you don't know what's happening with Lynch. Coffey out for a while. I don't expect this team to get to 10 and 8 in the Big Ten. And if that's the case, if you're 9 and 9, let's just say they go 9 and 9. Let's say they're basically out of that 10 and 8 spot in Big Ten play. So 9 and 9, that means they go 7 and 5. They would finish with a 20 and 11 record, and then they go into the Big Ten tournament. Say they win 1 game, lose the next. That's not good enough. And maybe it's taken into account what happens with Lynch and Coffey. Maybe both those guys come back in a month. I mean, we don't know. But as of now, to me, they'd have to, again, go 8 and 4, in their next 12. That's what's left in the college basketball season is 12 games, 12 conference games, and then you've got your conference tournament, of course. But so Minnesota's got an uphill climb as it is, and 2 of your top 4 players are missing. So to me, again, like you said, Troy, it doesn't even just hurt the starting 5 and your top 4 players and the contributions they have. You're missing out on a couple key guys in your starting 5 on the court. You're missing out on guys from the bench that have to replace those guys on the starting 5 that are thrust into those roles. So you're missing the oomph from your starting 5. You're missing some oomph off the bench. It hurts you everywhere, especially in basketball when 40% of your lineup is out, your starting lineup, the lineup that's on the court. That's huge. And this team doesn't know what's happening with either of them as far as returning. So, again, mentally, that has to hurt. So right now, Minnesota, to me, they're out of the tournament, if I had to predict it. But anything can happen with this team because we don't know how severe the injury is to Coffey, what the suspension is going to hold for Lynch. We've talked about Minnesota, certainly, as I go down the standings. Not going to mention them anymore. But this team's in trouble. And if Coffey gets healthy sooner than later, that would certainly help the Golden Gophers. Purdue, like I said, Troy, they're playing like the best team in the Big Ten, and number 3 in the country is what they're rated. You said they might be the best team in the country. And when, again, they beat Marquette early in the year, 3rd game of the year, Marquette's coach said that's a Final Four team, no doubt about it. They're playing that way right now. There's no question about that. They have won 13 or 14 straight. I guess I will.
13.
13 straight. They're winning, on average, Big Ten games by over 14 points a game. For the season, they're scoring over 85 points a game. They're holding teams to 62. They're holding teams to 62 points for the season. They're holding teams in the Big Ten to 62 points. They're playing real defense. They're playing phenomenal offense. They're very efficient. You've got shooters all over the court. You got a 7-2 guy in the middle who's efficient at being a post scorer, which is weird. It's almost hard to find guys who are efficient on the block now, and especially if you're 7-2, it's like, oh, you're 7'2", you're big. That's why you're playing basketball. Isaac Haas is a legitimate big in the sense that he can score, he can play real defense. He's a load in the middle. And then you've got experienced shooters, players, perimeter guys around him. That's a real team. That's veteran-led, that has dangerous guys, not only in the starting 5, but on the bench. They could win the whole thing. Which is not something I would have said coming into this year. But you, Troy, thought they could have been better without Swanigan. I didn't disagree, but they're exceeding my expectations to this point.
Yeah, I've flat out said I think you're going to see a team that's better than the last year's team, and they're proving it right now. And if you look, Kevin, I know you're in front of a computer. If you quickly pull their stats up, I want you to look at the distribution of scoring on this team. They can go anywhere. And, again, it's like me beating the board against the wall, and it just gets old after a while, but I got to keep saying it. Without Swanigan, the offense does not have to go through Swanigan like it did last year. If you remember watching Purdue last year, the ball always went to Swanigan at some point on every offensive possession. He was touching it almost every time. With this team, you've got guys that can utilize skill, that can go one-on-one, can isolate, and you don't have to always go through a guy. And that's why I thought this team would be better without him. And, again, that team last year was very good. And this team this year, I'll put them right now. I mean, I know it's January. They're great right now. They're playing great basketball. Can they continue for another 2 months? That's the question. They have proven they can, but now they got to play the games. And it's like anything. You can go into a little slump, and then everybody else will get off the Purdue bandwagon. But you're right, Kevin. I thought this team could be better than last year. I'm not jumping off the bandwagon if they drop 2 or 3 in the Big Ten. I mentioned it earlier. Teams are going to lose. They're going to have an off night. They're going to play bad defense one night, and somebody's going to be shooting the rocks out. You just hope it's not an Illinois or not a Rutgers or a Wisconsin, because then you feel embarrassed. But there's teams that can go out there and can get hot shooting. We could go down, and if we did this, it would take this show would be all night. It would just be like a 24-hour live show. You look at every roster in the Big Ten, Kevin, they've got shooters. Even lowly Rutgers, even lowly Illinois, they got guys that can shoot the ball. And if they get hot one night and you're off and you're playing bad defense and your shot's not going down, yeah, you can lose. That's simple. But every team in the Big Ten, Kevin, has a shooter. And if that guy gets hot and you keep feeding him the rock and he scores 30, 40 points, that could be enough if a Purdue or a Michigan State or a Michigan have an off night playing defense and their shot's not going down. Yeah, you could lose to anybody in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I'll say this. Iowa right now is averaging more points per game in the Big Ten than Purdue is. Iowa for the season averaging almost 82 points a game. They're 1-5 in the Big Ten. They just can't play defense. Illinois scores 78 points a game. That's more than Michigan State. That's more than Michigan. That's more than Indiana. That's more than Maryland. That's more than Penn State. That's more than every single Big Ten team except Ohio State. Illinois is averaging the second most points in the Big Ten per game. And yet they're 0-5. They're winless. They can't play defense. So, I mean, yeah, if you have an off-night shooting and you're playing Iowa, you're playing Illinois, and they hang 74 on you, oh, well, sorry, you lose. I mean, Iowa's got to win for a reason. Rutgers is averaging 58 points per game. That's not a real offense. But, yeah, have a bad game against Iowa, have a bad game against Illinois. Those are the bottom two teams in the conference right now. And yet they're still averaging 77, 78 points a game. They can't shoot. They can score. Rutgers really has a problem scoring. Wisconsin has a problem scoring. Northwestern right now does, but their players are capable. Those are the bottom offenses in terms of points per game in the Big Ten, but there's also only two teams in the Big Ten not scoring 73 a game. And that's Rutgers, of course, and Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin!
Yeah. But so back to Purdue. The big thing, too, is their big four. Kind of like Minnesota a year ago. You have Carson Edwards, Vince Edwards, Isaac Haas, Dakota Mathias averaging 16, 14, 14, 13. I mean, just those four alone, I'll do quick math. 28, 44, 57 points. You start averaging the others. Hold on, I already forgot. 30, 44, 57, so close to 60 points a game just between the four of them. Then you add 8 from a senior late an upperclassman guard in P.J. Thompson. Ryan Klein can shoot. From 3, he hasn't even been doing that well necessarily this year. He's only averaging 4 a game. Matt Harms can score, shooting 58% from the field. This team has options. Their top 4 is absolutely getting it done, but they have other options as well. This team is just good all over the place. They've got, 8 guys averaging at least 12 minutes a game. Those 8 guys have appeared in every game. The 9th is averaging 8 minutes a game, appeared in every game except 1. So they go 8 deep, and their top 4 are absolute studs. You got a couple guys in Thompson and Klein who can also shoot. And then another one, Matt Harms, again, shooting 58% from the field. This team is really good. They're playing that way. Like you said, Troy, you just have to go out there and prove it game in, game out. And so far, Purdue is absolutely doing that. So that's all I have on Purdue. They're impressing me a ton. To move down, Ohio State. Ohio State also 6-0 in the Big Ten. This past week, what did they do? They went 2-0 after beating Michigan State by 16 points. They played Maryland at home 4 days later, and they beat Maryland by 22 points. So Ohio State put up 91 on Maryland, held them to under 70. That's domination. And then they played Rutgers 3 days later, also beat them by 22 points. Ohio State
they should.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'll say this, that a middle-of-the-road Big Ten team who can lose to any team out there, it's impressive to beat a Big Ten team by 22 points. Whether it's Rutgers, whether it's Iowa, Illinois, who can't defend anybody, whether it's Wisconsin, who can't score, it's still impressive to, and I think that's on the road. Rutgers has beaten Wisconsin, which call Wisconsin what they are. But again, Rutgers is capable. Rutgers is capable of doing some things. So I think, to me, if you win on the road in the Big Ten by 22 points, it's still impressive, and especially beating Maryland by 22 points. Ohio State's playing really good basketball in general. This coming week at Northwestern, who's struggling, they play Minnesota at home. Then in the following week, they get Nebraska at home, they get Penn State at home, they get Indiana at home, then they get Illinois at home. That's going into February. I mentioned this a week ago, that Ohio State may not be for real, but they may not even have to necessarily prove it because they only played one ranked team the rest of the way. That's still the case, except now it's two ranked teams because they play Michigan the third last game of the season. Michigan's ranked 23rd in the country. But
for now,
going through the schedule, right? So going through the schedule again, Northwestern struggling, Minnesota struggling, Nebraska middle of the pack, Penn State middle of the pack, Indiana middle of the pack, Illinois at bottom. Then finally, February 7th, they play Purdue. And then you get Iowa, you get Penn State again, Michigan, and then to close the year, Rutgers, Indiana. I mean, Ohio State, they're going to be piling up wins, not necessarily because they're fantastic, even though they're playing really good basketball right now. They don't even necessarily have to play fantastic up until February, realistically. They could potentially be 7-0, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-0 in Big Ten play before playing Purdue. I'm not saying they will be, but they should be favored in these next 6 games going into Purdue February 7th. They could be 12-0. They could be 21-4 overall. That's a legitimate possibility because their schedule is not even that difficult. Again, talking about the Big Ten and how deep they are, but again, Penn State at home, Nebraska at home, Indiana at home, Minnesota at home. I mean, to close the year, they've got 4 of their last 6 are on the road, at Penn State, at Purdue, at Michigan, at Indiana. Those will be difficult. That'll be a good test for them, though, going into the Big Ten tournament, going into the NCAA tournament. But Ohio State's record could get really lofty really quickly, and we're seeing it during this early portion of the Big Ten.
You're the positive youngster. I'll be the naysayer then. But on the flip side, you look at the middle of the pack games; those are games they could lose.
Yeah.
So they could all of a sudden be 6-3. And again, I'm saying that out of, I guess, the competitive nature of the Big Ten. That Ohio State is playing good basketball. The schedule, it is what it is. I mean, the schedule is the schedule. You play who's on the schedule. But it goes back to you're mentioning the home and away. I think is so important. And you look at teams traveling and to win on the road, whether it's the Big Ten, whether it's the ACC, whether it's the Pac-10, the SEC, whatever it is hard to go on the road and win at any level, let alone college basketball. Teams tend to play a lot better at home, a lot of tendencies. You look at some of these dominant teams that are in the top 25, and you look at their home records, not just 1 year, over time. They are going to go out and win at home. They take care of business at home. So that's one thing going for them. But on the flip side, these middle-of-the-pack teams that you mentioned, they might not be playing good basketball right now, but I always use the analogy about flipping on the light switch. If any of those middle-of-the-pack teams flip on the light switch, they're hard to beat. They're a tough out. And they're going to go out and they're going to play. So Ohio State, though, to me, Kevin, you're absolutely right. Exceeding every expectation that I had of them. I wasn't sure what we were going to expect with a new coach, but I'll tell you what, they've bought into the system. And they're going out and they're playing well. But you look at it, for them to not make the tournament now where they're sitting in January, the wheels would have to fall off the bus. Because there are wins in the Big Ten. If we follow our model, they literally only have to go 4-8 to close out the year and then get that magical 10 wins in the Big Ten. Now, granted, again, that's not a guarantee, but that's where Kevin and I are looking at the selection committee to even be considered. You've got to be around 10-8. And Ohio State right now, Kevin, what do they got to do? Just go 4-8 over their last 12, right?
Yeah. Yep. Basically a South Carolina collapse of 3-9 in the last 12. Ohio State, I don't know if they'd be able to go 3-9, but I guess you're also including Big Ten tournament stuff. If they can get a double bye, I think that'd be huge. And at this rate, to finish top 4 in the conference, I'll put it this way: teams 3, 4, and 5 or 4 and 2. One of those is going to drop off. I would assume Indiana. You'll probably have a team from the middle of the pack also join that group. But Ohio State's, again, their schedule is light for the next almost month. I think very highly of what Ohio State is to do up until February 7th, whatever it was, when they play Purdue. This team, to me, should have 20 wins. They should be at least 20-5. I guess I'll say that. That'll be my prediction, is they'll be at least 20-5, at least 9-1. I believe that would be 9-1 in Big Ten play going into that Purdue game. I'll say
wow! That. Look at the youngster throwing out stuff. 9-1 Ohio State. Who would have thunk it?
Yeah, not me. Not me. Or actually, it would be 11-1. Sorry, 11-1 in Big Ten play, not 9-1. 11-1 in Big Ten play. 20-5 overall. They'll lose somewhere in these next 6 games. But in general, a lot of home games, and their toughest game might be at Northwestern. If not, then at home against Penn State or Indiana. Right now, Ohio State's playing better basketball than both those teams. Indiana's playing well as of the last week. But Ohio State, again, 3 games ago, prior to last week, beat Michigan State by 16 points. This team's playing for real, and they don't have a real dogfight ahead of them, again, until February 7th against Purdue. So 20-5, 11-1 in Big Ten play. That's what I'll go with. That'll be my prediction. What happens in that last, 3 weeks or so, I won't say. But going forward for the next 6 games, it looks pretty good to me. I'll say that much. So to move on, we won't spend as much time as we did on those first few teams. But moving on, number 3, Michigan State, going 1-1 in the past week, 4-2 in Big Ten play. Again, there's that dip. Purdue and Ohio State are 6-0. Michigan State's 4-2. Certainly still think, I guess that's my next question to you, Troy. I personally still think Michigan State is going to get their act together. I don't know if they'll finish ahead of Purdue. They could certainly finish ahead of Ohio State at this point. But to me, Michigan State, I would still probably select them to win the whole thing, unless they straight up don't look like they're getting better going into March Madness. And Purdue still looks like a juggernaut. I may take Purdue potentially to win the whole thing if they keep looking this way. But I haven't wavered from thinking that Michigan State can't turn it around and be the best team in the country when it's all said and done.
It's funny, in the world of sports, everybody jumps on and off bandwagons.
Yeah.
I tend not to. I mean, I'm going to give, I guess if you want to call it an excuse, you can take it as an excuse. If you look at that Michigan State roster, Kevin, how many seniors are on that team?
Yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to mention. 4 sophomores, 1 freshman starting for those starting 5.
Exactly. And you look at that starting lineup, what happened to Michigan State last year, why they struggled so much in the middle of the year? A couple of injuries. They had an injury before the season even started for their transfer.
Yeah, and transfer and
so
the big guy.
When you look at it, we just mentioned this with Minnesota. Now, granted, for Minnesota, it happened in the middle of the year. For Michigan State, they've pretty much got a new starting 5. They've got a nucleus of talent that has to learn how to play together. And you're telling me that Tom Izzo is not going to be able to get this team to play together? Maybe the old Michigan State rah-rah, fire D'Antonio will come up. Fire Izzo, because his team's not doing good enough. Yeah, I had to be sarcastic there because it's so funny. Because now you don't hear any buzz about Michigan State because they dropped 2 games in the Big Ten. Oh, well, it happens. They could drop 5 or 6 in the Big Ten, Kevin, and I'd still think they're the best team in the Big Ten. Now, as of today, though, I may waver a little bit because, like I said, this Purdue team, holy cow, top to bottom, they're playing good, solid basketball. They're playing good team basketball. So right now, if you match these 2 teams together, I'm actually giving the advantage to Purdue, but it's not a big advantage because that Michigan State team is so talented. They just got to play together. They got to play team basketball. And I always hate to repeat myself, but you go back to what I said about Purdue. You got this monster of a talent in Swanigan. So you got to get him involved in the game. That takes away from other players. And you take away the great player, and now you let other guys all step up and play team basketball. And so I'm not saying that's what's happening on Michigan State right now, but I think you have a lot of guys trying to be the guy. If that makes any sense to you, they're trying to be the guy. But for Tom Izzo in Michigan State, he doesn't need a guy. He's a team-oriented coach. So I really think that's what you're seeing right now at Michigan State. You got individual skill going all around on this roster. They just haven't fallen into the Izzo mode yet. And when they fall into that Izzo mode, you're going to see the same type basketball from Michigan State that we're seeing from Purdue right now. It just takes time. You mentioned it, 4 sophomores and a freshman starting. These are young kids. None of them are probably even 21 yet. They've got to find the mode because, Kevin, when you were 19 or 20, did you not have an ego? You wanted to be the guy. You wanted to be good at everything you did. You don't learn certain –
especially if you're that talented.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, yeah, especially if you're that talented, you're that highly recruited. Miles Bridges, seems like a nice guy and all for the team, and I would love to have him on the Boston Celtics as a Celtics fan. But, yeah, Miles Bridges is seen as the head. But Jaren Jackson Jr., a top 10 recruit, freshman coming in. Cassius Winston, called by Tom Izzo as the best passer in program history outside of Magic. Nick Ward was a big player a year ago, now averaging under 20 minutes a game, partially due to foul trouble. There's a lot of kind of new pieces, but not even necessarily new pieces, but the transfer from last year getting over 8 minutes a game, the big from a year ago who didn't play a game due to injury, averaging over 10 minutes a game. There are a lot of guys averaging 8, 10, 12 minutes a game. There's like 4 of them in there, and then you got a couple averaging 20, and Matt McQuaid averaging 19, and Nick Ward averaging 19. There just has to be some cohesion between those starting 5 guys that have all the talent in the world, but it just seems like there's a lot of guys in the mix, and that speaks to how deep Michigan State is. But, yeah, to go back to your point, a lot of these guys probably do want to be the guy, and Josh Langford a year ago didn't necessarily prove it, but I think he's playing well. He's certainly improved, averaging the 3rd most minutes on the team, the starting 2 guard, 13 points a game, 3rd on the team, 48% from the field, 46% from 3. He's improved. I thought that would absolutely take Michigan State to another level because the ability was certainly there a year ago. He just didn't really show it. This year he is, but Nick Ward's taken a big step down as the team's starting center. And then again, you add a freshman, Jaren Jackson Jr., only averaging 23 minutes a game, but he's being effective. There's just a lot of different guys getting their hands in the pot, which is a good thing, I think, in March. But as this team is super young and you've got veteran guys on the bench adding, experience and valuable playing time over the course of the season, averaging, again, 8, 10, 12 minutes a game between 4 of them coming off the bench. There's just I don't know how much this team is gelling from its starting unit because there are so many guys. I think this team's got a lot of gelling to do over the next 12 games going into the conference tournament. They need to figure out their lineup in general, not starting lineup, but rotations, I guess is what I mean, because there are a lot of talented guys on this team, obviously. You've got everyone except one player on the roster averaging at least 8 minutes a game. Everyone but 3 averaging double digits. There are a lot of good players on this team, but they just have to figure out what works, what doesn't in certain situations, who plays well with each other in the starting 5. As long as Nick Ward can stay on the court, that would be a big starting point for those top 5 guys gelling with one another.
And you know what, Kevin? Izzo is such a great coach. This could all be a plan. I don't think when you get to March that he goes as deep as he goes now. I think he may even be trying to figure out what's going on right now. This could be look at all of his teams, and he's had some good ones. This could be the most talented roster he's ever had at Michigan State. Yeah. And as a coach, I'll go back to my coaching days. When you have talent like that, sometimes it's harder to coach. And what I mean by that is you got so much to figure out. How do you use all the talent? When you have one guy that you can rely on, it's easy to coach. Because it's like, oh, well, we'll go to the youngster because he's the dominant guy. We'll run the offense through the youngster. Well, we're not going to add the old man in there. The old man's not going to help. But you add some of youngster's friends in there that are as talented, if not more talented. What do you do? How do you figure this out? What do you do for a game plan? Because they all want it. They all can't have it. So right now what you're seeing, at least in my opinion, for Michigan State, you said it too, they just got to figure it out. On paper and individual talent, it's all there. And that's why I said when they finally put it together, they're going to be the best team in the country. They have, in my opinion, the most skill. And you got Tom Izzo as a coach, and I think he's still trying to figure it out. He'll never admit that. But I think he's still trying to figure it out. And that comes from me personally as a coach, trying to figure out things. You know I love to share stories, Kevin. Love to. I coached a very good traveling team, soccer, 13 and 14-year-old boys. Just talented, probably from my top guy down to number 17. Well, you know soccer, Kevin. How many guys can start?
Not 17.
Not 17.
That's for sure.
So, the thing you got to do, you're going to a tournament. When you're going to a tournament, I know you probably don't know and you probably don't care about a thing called the USA Cup, but it's one of the biggest youth soccer tournaments in the country. Well, you don't want to go there and keep mixing and matching lineups. You want to win.
Right.
But when I looked at my roster, I'm like, I got 17 guys that could start. How do I start this team? How do I substitute this team? And it's one of those things where it is very trying as a coach, because I don't want to say you second guess yourself, and it's not even like, oh, I feel bad. I didn't feel bad. I'm like, how do I find the right combination? I got too much to work with. Because it's like, well, I can take him off the bench and I can substitute him here or there, and the other. And I'm just going to keep going on. I'm going to keep rambling, because now you get guys that can play more than one position. You get guys that can help you more than one way, and you're sitting there going, what the hell do I do? And it's not that you're not a good coach. You're just overwhelmed with the amount of talent you have and what your players can do for you, that it can confuse you. I hope that made some sense to you, youngster. I wanted to share that, though.
Yeah, there's something to be said for going 8 deep and someone gets in foul trouble. Well, okay, that's fine. We still have 7, and we've got our backup guard. We've got our backup big. There you go. That's all we need. Boom. We've got our 4 talented super freshmen, and then we've got 4 veterans. Okay, boom, that's it. this Michigan State team, like you were pointing to, Troy, the top 5 are all young. Matt McQuaid, older. Gavin Schilling, older. Lou Rawls-Nair Jr., older. Kenny Goins, I'm pretty sure, is older. Ben Carter is the transfer. He's older. All those guys getting 8+ minutes a game. I didn't mention Xavier Tillman, who's also getting 8 minutes a game. Just those guys averaging 8 minutes a game in Carter and Tillman. 67% from the floor, 50% from the floor. They can obviously play. If you're making 67% of your shots, that's unbelievable. He's averaging 8 minutes a game on this team. Gavin Schilling, 10 minutes a game, 72% from the field. Lou Rawls-Nair Jr. doesn't really have a jumper, averaging 20 minutes a game, 52% from the field. These are all backups. Matt McQuaid, 19 minutes a game. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys that can really play. And I didn't even mention the guy shooting 67% in those 5 that I just counted. You've got 11
That's
guys
5
on this
guys,
team.
Kevin, that could be starting on any Big Ten team in this conference. They could start on any team in the conference.
There are 6 backups. There are 11 guys on this team, 8+ minutes a game. And again, those 8+ minutes a game, 67%, 50% from the field. This team goes legitimately 11 deep. They can. Are they going to play 11 in March? Like you said, Troy, absolutely not. Maybe you'll have 11 guys play in a game because one guy gets 2 minutes. But as a whole, Tom Izzo has to figure it out because, like you pointed to, I think this is his most talented team. I've got nothing else on this team. They're going to have growing pains, obviously, as the season goes along. Not to say that they're going to finish, 11-7 in conference, but this team is not going to win out. They have to figure out what is best. They may take the Big Ten tournament to figure out what's best. Hey, we want to win. We truly want to win this tournament. Let's see what happens with this group, out on the court, this game plan, this certain situation, if we go big, if we go small, who we should play if we go big, if we go small, what defenses work well if we go big, if we go small, if we just have our top 5 players out there. There's a lot to figure out over the course of a season, over the course of a Big Ten tournament. It's all in preparation for the NCAA tournament. That's all that matters. Michigan State knows they're going to be in the NCAA tournament one way or another. Like the Cavs in the East, if they're the 8th seed, I still favor them to win the East. Michigan State's a 16th seed, I still favor them to get to a Final Four. So this team just wants to figure it out. They want to be healthy. They want to figure out which lineups work. So, yeah, there's going to be losses. That's my assumption for what's going on. I think that's yours as well, Troy. Izzo's got his most talented group ever, in my opinion, and it's just going to take time to figure out how to juggle 11 guys on a basketball team who can obviously all contribute one way or another.
Yep, sounds good. Let's move on because we really tend to keep flying with every team. So we got a bunch more teams to get through yet here in a short amount of time.
Yes, we do. Michigan at 4-2 in conference play, just like Michigan State. Over this past week, went 1-1. We talked about Michigan. They were 3-1 in conference play. We were like, this team could easily be 3-3 after this next week. They played Purdue. They played Michigan State. They lost to Purdue by 1 point, and then they won at Michigan State by 10. I watched a solid amount of that Michigan State game. I didn't see Purdue. Again, I wish I had. But Michigan State, it's at Michigan State. You're going to have basically half the place Michigan State fans, half of them Michigan fans because it's in the state of Michigan, obviously. So in any case, Michigan looked like a really good, capable team. And again, Michigan State trying to figure it out. They give up a couple runs to Michigan, and Michigan scores 82 points. It's kind of a lot like last year. You're losing your point guard, Derek Walton Jr. this year from a year ago, who was a huge playmaker. But this team's got a number of playmakers all over the court. They're showing it, being 15-4 overall, 3rd in the Big Ten, 4-2 in Big Ten play. Michigan can score, just like they can a year ago. It may look a little different, but 3 guys averaging 10+. You've got another averaging 9, then you've got a few averaging 6 and 4. Everyone shooting, basically at least 46% from the field. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys shooting at least 54% from the field. This team can score. No question about it. and they're outscoring most of their opponents, and they're a top 25 team right now. I guess going forward, I'll mention their schedule for what's to come. This week, they play Maryland at home. That'll be an interesting one. That's actually tonight, January 15th, as we record the show. And then they travel to play Nebraska, and then they play Rutgers at home. So they get 3 Big Ten games. They could certainly win all 3, but at Nebraska is not a cupcake either this year. Nebraska has shown to be somewhat consistent middle of the pack this year to this point. I'm impressed with Michigan looking as good as they did because I expected some drop-off from a year ago, losing especially their point guard. But they've looked good, and beating Michigan State certainly can attest to that, and they've beaten Indiana this year by 14 points, and Indiana's also 4-2 in Big Ten play. So I'm impressed with Michigan to this point.
Yeah, I'll tell you, they're actually doing a lot better, Kevin, than I thought they would early in the season. Yeah. Like you said, we talk about all these moving parts. We talked about new people coming into a system and how faster you're going to gel. I think what's happened with Michigan, these guys have gelled together real quick, and that's good for them. I mean, to pull off a big win against the Michigan State team, we mentioned it. I mean, they're going to get the love. They're going to get the respect, and getting that win, that is huge for them because we talked about ending 10-8 in the Big Ten. Well, if you have a bunch of teams logged in at 10-8, they're going to start looking at quality wins. And that Michigan State win, I don't care what Michigan State does from here on out. That's going to be a quality win at the end of the year no matter who you are. Whether it be 4 or 5 blemishes on Michigan State's record, I don't know. But the ones that get a win against Michigan State, that's going to look like a huge win and a quality win, and that could be so important if you're a bubble team. And to be honest, I still think Michigan is one of those middle-of-the-pack teams. And so getting a quality win like that is huge for them. But they have exceeded what I thought they would do. I thought they'd be more around that 6-7 seat spot probably because they did lose a lot. But they're playing good basketball right now, and it's fun to watch. Yeah.
Number 5, Indiana, 11-7 overall, also 4-2. Went 2-0 this past week. They beat Penn State at home by 4. They also beat Northwestern by 20. We'll talk about Northwestern in a bit, but those are 2 quality victories. Penn State's a middle-of-the-road Big Ten team who both Troy and I liked before the year started. Indiana's playing better than I thought. Again, another middle-of-the-pack team. I think Michigan is above average in terms of the Big Ten. I give Michigan more love than I give Indiana. But as a whole, they are becoming a middle-of-the-pack team who's somewhat separating themselves, not really, kind of, sort of. But 4-2 in conference play, again, you're hoping to win 10 games. That gives you a strong possibility of making it. Go 6-6 in your last 12, and Indiana's right there at 10-8. So every win you can get is going to be meaningful. And Indiana, if they can stay in the top 5 of the Big Ten, you're getting in the tournament. That's for sure. I've got nothing more to add on Indiana. I guess they also travel to play Michigan State on Friday. That would be enormous, but Michigan State could certainly down them by 20 points.
Yeah, I don't have much to add about Indiana. It's going to sound kind of repetitive here for the next couple of teams. I mean, you just look at these middle-of-the-pack teams, and it's going to be really hills and valleys for these teams. Again, I'll circle back to what you said in the beginning of the show. These teams are going to beat each other up. They can look really good one night, but then they got to travel. They can look great at home. They could look like crap on the road. It's college basketball. These teams in the middle, is somebody going to separate themselves? I'm not sure if Indiana's a team that will separate themselves. So this is an Indiana team that I think is an average Big Ten team, and what I mean by that, they're in the middle of the pack. That still means if you're an average Big Ten team, you're a tournament team. So Indiana could be a tournament team. Are they going to have the will to separate themselves and vault into that like 3rd, 4th, 5th spot? I don't think so. I think you're going to see Indiana in that 5, 6, 7 spot somewhere along the line, but I have nothing else to add on them either.
Yeah, moving on. Maryland played 1 Big Ten game. They lost at Ohio State by 22, like I mentioned earlier. That was it. This is a team whose 3 best players are sophomores. They're going to go through their ups and downs. They lost by Michigan State to 30. They lost to Ohio State by 22. They beat Iowa by 18. Those are their last 3 games. This team's a good one, but they're young. They are not at the elite level for sure in this conference, but they're a talented bunch who's young, kind of like Michigan State, except they don't have that kind of depth. I shouldn't say kind of like Michigan State, but their best players are young guys. They're all 3 sophomores. So this team needs to figure out life without Melo Trimble in the Big Ten. They're 3-on-3 in conference play. This coming week, they travel to Michigan. They also play Minnesota, so could very easily go 1-1 there. But this Maryland team, I expect them to be a tournament team, 3-3 in the Big Ten, somewhat expected with how good Ohio State's playing. They've also played Purdue. Their 3 losses are to Purdue, Michigan State, and Ohio State, who right now are playing like the top 3 teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, well, Kevin, this is a team I'm not going to put them on the same page as Purdue, but they lost Trimble. And as Trimble went, so did Maryland. And I think this is going to be a better team without him, and I think they've got to figure that out. They've got some talented guys, but I think they've got to get some confidence to believe that anybody can step up and lead this team. You know, I think they've lost their leader, and that's a big leader to lose because he was a great college basketball player. But I think Maryland has talent, and when they figure out that, hey, we don't need him to win, we can be a good dominant team by spreading the ball around with the skill that they have, I think they can pull off some wins, and I think they're going to pull off an upset. I'm not saying it's a Michigan State upset, but I think this is a team that can actually go through and win some big games this year in the Big Ten and maybe even in the tournament.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. Moving on to 7th would be Penn State, also 3-3 in conference, 13-6 overall. This past week went to Indiana, lost by 4. That's, understandable at Indiana. Also beat Nebraska in overtime. Nebraska is not a cupcake like most people think, probably, when thinking about Nebraska basketball. Not that they're great, but they are playing decent. So Penn State going 1-1 this past week. Again, a talented team who's fairly young for the most part. This coming week, they play Minnesota Northwestern, another couple middle-of-the-road teams right now. Would be huge. Any win in the Big Ten is big because, again, you want to get to that 10 number. If you get to 11, to me, that's automatic in the tournament. But getting 10 is key. And then, again, if you can beat other middle-of-the-road teams like Minnesota Northwestern, that'll be huge before they play Ohio State next week.
Yeah, Nebraska is a team, Kevin, really didn't have an opinion one way or the other, but, they're going out and they would have a chance. I said it last week. They've proven that they are a middle-of-the-pack team, and again, those middle-of-the-pack teams, if they can pull off a few wins here and there, get some quality wins, all of a sudden you make the tournament. I don't think I thought they were really a tournament team, a month ago? But they're out there and they're playing. They're a tough game. It's probably, again, more than I thought they were going to be able to do, but good job for Nebraska. That's all I got on them.
Yeah. Starting center also Jordy Shimanga, just because I wrote a couple articles about him over the past couple days. Starting center has basically announced that he wants to transfer because his season has not become one that has been fulfilling for him. But in general, this Nebraska team has shown that they can go out and beat decent teams. I'll say that much about them. To move on to number 9 would be Wisconsin, and Wisconsin went 0-1 this past week, and Wisconsin lost to Nebraska by 4. That was their only loss from this past week. They play at Purdue January 16th. That'll be an interesting one, Troy. That's on ESPN, Tuesday, January 16th at Purdue. Could see a nice little Wisconsin upset there.
Come on. I'm just overly excited that Wisconsin is 2-3 in the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned it before. You brought up Wisconsin. I said bad. They've got so many injuries. They're so young. We talked about moving parts and doing different things. This is not the rotation. This is not the team that they thought they were going to have a month ago. And the problem they have, though, is you could say, well, then they got to figure it out. Well, the problem is they don't have the talent to figure it out right now.
Right.
What they have on the floor right now is not enough talent to be a player in the Big Ten. I'll put it that way. I'm not going to say they can't compete, but they don't have enough talent to be a player in the Big Ten. And they're the only Big Ten team without 10 wins. They're 9-9. Everyone else has 10 wins. Even Rutgers has 10 wins.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not sitting here, and it's not to bash Wisconsin. You know me, Kevin. I am a diehard Badger fan. I grew up in Wisconsin. I love my Badgers. I'm being real. It's to watch them play. I'm not even getting mad because I know that, look, they don't have the talent on the roster right now to be a player in the Big Ten. So yeah, I'm a little bit. Yeah, I look at it. I don't put any faith in Wisconsin pulling off big upsets. They get a win. It's like Christmas for me right now, Kevin, because this team. If you actually look at this team and look at the teams that are the so-called bottom dwellers, Wisconsin's not numerically a bottom dweller, but when it comes to the level of play in the roster, I put Wisconsin as a bottom dweller. They've got players, but again, in my mind, they got a couple wins, and that's great. And they're falling into the middle of the pack, but they're not even a middle of the pack team right now, Kevin.
Yeah, they can't score better than Iowa and Illinois can, who are at the bottom of the conference right now. They obviously can play better defense. But yeah, they're 62 points a game in Big Ten play. That's not going to get it done. It's just not. Even for the season, they're not averaging 70. Like you said, 9-9 overall. They've lost a couple straight now. They're struggling, and I don't see it necessarily getting better, as do you. We've talked about Minnesota already, who's 10th. The last 2-4 team is Northwestern in Big Ten play. They went 1-1 this past week. They lost to Indiana by 20 on the road. That hurts. They also beat Minnesota by 23 points. So Minnesota struggling. Northwestern able to get a win there, but in general, I mean, recent schedule: lost to Nebraska, lost to Penn State, lost to Indiana, beat Minnesota. It's not looking great for Northwestern, and if they want to finish 10-8, they've got to go 8-4 the rest of the way. After last year, I thought this was absolutely a tournament team and probably a top 7 seed in the tournament, maybe 6 seed. But this year's group for Northwestern has just, for whatever reason, has not figured it out because a year ago, most of those key contributors are back. So they have not lived up to expectations, losing at Indiana by 20 points, only scoring 46, which was a season low. That's not good. And next they play Ohio State. That would be a huge win going forward. Northwestern has to figure it out quickly. And other than Northwestern, we've got 3 bottom dwellers in Rutgers, Iowa, and Illinois, which I've got very few points to talk about there, other than a couple things, which will take a minute or two.
Yeah, I don't have much on Northwestern other than disappointment. I mean, did they go make the NCAA tournament for the first time in school history and then think they didn't have to work in the off season? Because that's what it looks like when I watch them play. There's one thing, and if you want to call me a basher, I guess I'm bashing them right now. They're just not playing good basketball. They don't look like the same team from last year, and you mentioned it. What's different on that team, Kevin? 1 or 2 players? They looked a lot hungrier last year. Do they think that it's just a cakewalk to make the NCAA tournament after you've never been there and last year was the first year you made it? I mean, that's what it looks like to me. There's a difference in a team between a Michigan State and a Northwestern. Michigan State has a ton of talent, and they've been there over and over and over and know what it takes, the grind to get there. I'm wondering if Northwestern thought it was just a foregone conclusion. hey, we'll finish, 10-8 in the Big Ten, 11-7 in the Big Ten. We'll get ready for the tournament. That program is not ready to just cruise through and make tournaments. They've got to play. Yeah. And I guess I'm just disappointed in them because there's not much different from last year's roster to this year's. Maybe a little drop-off somewhere, maybe defensively, maybe a little bit of scoring. But overall, that team should have been in the middle, if not into maybe the 4th, 5th spot in the conference. You thought they would take a step up from that experience. I think they've taken a step back. It's, can they go out and can they win? Yeah, they got talent. They've proven it. I don't know if they want it right now. And I hate to say that because I was an athlete and you go out and you play to win. But I'm wondering if maybe there's part of them like, holy cow, this is harder than we thought. So maybe they got spoiled making the tournament. And maybe it's new to them. I don't know. It's hard to put a finger on it because that team is basically the same team from last year.
Yeah. Scotty Lindsey, Bryant McIntosh, Vic Law, Derek Perdone, they're all talented. They're all back from a year ago. This team just is not playing great basketball. Kind of like Michigan State, except Michigan State's a lot deeper and a lot more talented. That's the way Northwestern's playing. And, again, you can't coast into the NCAA tournament if you're Northwestern. If you work hard and you play good basketball, yeah, this team should have been 6, 7, 8 seed, 6, 7 seed, in my opinion. But they're not. They're just not playing good basketball. The top 2 scorers shooting under 40% for the year. So it's just not efficient. They're not playing good basketball, not playing well offensively. They've lost 5 of their last – or sorry, I was looking at Rutgers. They've lost 4 of their last 6. So just as a whole, give up 104 points to Oklahoma, score 46 points against Indiana. Things are going wrong defensively and offensively for this team. And playing against Ohio State, I don't see that kind of righting the ship because Ohio State's playing really well. To move on to the bottom 3, you've got Rutgers at 1-5, Iowa at 1-5, Illinois at 0-5 to close it out. For Rutgers, I'll say this. We gave them some kudos after they beat Seton Hall December 16th, basically a month ago. Since then, they lost to Stony Brook. They lost to Hartford. They also, of course, lost to Purdue, lost to Michigan State, lost to Ohio State. Their only win is over Wisconsin, since Seton Hall, which was basically a month ago.
You had to say it and laugh. You had to say it and laugh.
I did.
That's when I knew it was going to be a long road this year.
Yeah. Rutgers is not a fantastic team. They've got some quality losses, but losing to Stony Brook and Hartford, not exactly quality. But in any case, they play Iowa this week. They play Michigan this week. Playing Iowa will be interesting. Iowa can score. Rutgers can't. Rutgers is at home in that game. I would expect Iowa to win. I would expect Rutgers to be fighting with Illinois, truly at the bottom of this conference. But, again, Iowa can't play much defense either. I've got nothing more on Rutgers. Otherwise, I'll move on to Iowa.
Yeah. Iowa's Iowa. I guess I've been a little down on the whole Iowa program, football, basketball, all of it. Iowa's always been a team to me that maybe underachieves basketball-wise. Where they're sitting right now, probably a surprise to me that they're, second from last, just ahead of Illinois. Yeah. But, it's a team that could they vault up into that 8th, 9th spot? Yeah, they could. But I have not seen a full game of Iowa. I've seen some highlights. I've caught bits and pieces. So I can't give a full analysis. But, if I go by record and look at some things, I don't know if they're really going to figure out much. I mean, could be if you're an Iowa fan, you might want to join me at the local watering hole to drown your sorrows because that's what it's looking like. And sometimes that happens, though. I mean, you have those years where things don't go right, and you've got to wave the white flag, and that's what it seems to me right now with Iowa. But I don't see them jumping up and making these giant strides and becoming an NCAA tournament team.
No. Before the year started, I was higher than most on this team. I thought they could be certainly on the bubble and push for an NCAA tournament bid. I thought they were young but a little bit talented. Not going to say young and talented because that kind of infers Michigan State. If you're talented, you can beat a lot of teams. I don't think I was that good coming into the year, but they've disappointed me. Again, I thought they were going to be a bubble team this year, and they have not played that way. Their only win in the Big Ten it was at Illinois, but it went into overtime, 104-97. Again, both those teams can't play defense. Iowa's young, has some talent. Illinois is pretty much the same way. But again, Iowa plays Rutgers this week and Purdue. So splitting that almost seems likely to me. And then finally, Illinois hasn't won a Big Ten game yet. Again, came close to beating Iowa, but good for Illinois. They play Wisconsin. When is that? They play Wisconsin, this week. So at Wisconsin, Illinois could get their first Big Ten win, just like Rutgers did Troy. Otherwise, if they don't, Illinois is probably going to be 0-7. They play at Nebraska. Not that that's an automatic loss, but playing Wisconsin is almost a good thing nowadays, unfortunately, for the Badgers. And Illinois could get that first Big Ten win this week. Fox Sports 1 Friday. Wisconsin's got some interesting games, both at the top of the conference and at the bottom.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Illinois could definitely get their first win. I'll tell you that. It's just one of those things. Illinois is in that same boat. They're just probably getting some experience this year, and that'll be that. So I have nothing else on Illinois other than you had to mention Wisconsin.
I did. I'll stop beating that into the ground. For me, right now, the last thing I wanted to mention, Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan State, Michigan, Maryland. I think those 5 are locks to me. I think Indiana can make their way in, 4-2 in Big Ten play again. But those 5 are locks to me. Purdue, Ohio State, Michigan, and Maryland. And then you've got teams who kind of have to prove it in Indiana and Penn State and Nebraska and Minnesota and Northwestern. We said, probably 7-8 teams make the tournament. I've got 5 locks right now, and then some teams who just have to prove things. So it'll be interesting to see. Again, we're still early on in the Big Ten season, but we're getting to that middle portion where by next week most teams have played 8 Big Ten games. We're going to know more and more about these teams. Got some interesting matchups going forward, but only 5 locks for me, which seems low considering I think the Big Ten is better as a conference this year than it was a year ago.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit and say I've got X locked in or so and so locked in. I need to see some more games yet, Kevin. I mean, we're only 6 games in. Some teams only 5 games in. There's definitely some teams I don't think will be in there. Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin. So I guess I'll go the other way, locked out of the tournament, maybe into the Continental Tournament or whatever they call that one. But there's a number of teams, as on the show today we talked about, that could make a push. But you always say it, who's going to separate themselves? Those are the teams that are going to be in the tournament. But it's so hard to separate yourself in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten because there's so many competitive teams. We just talked about Northwestern being a team that is, disappointed. But what if they turn a light switch on? What if the light switch does go on? That's a team then that all of a sudden, they started off, they're 2-4 now? Maybe they run off a 7-5 record at the end of the year. And then they're 9-9. And in the way, they knock off some other teams that could be bubble teams. So, I mean, there's a lot of good teams in the Big Ten. So we'll see what happens here moving forward. That's all I got.
Yeah. Got nothing else for the listeners. It's been an hour 40 or so long show. Again, follow us on Twitter at youngsteroldman. Follow me at Kid Cunning. Follow Troy at TroyRobert967. That's all I got. We will see you guys next week. I am closing the show for the first time in forever. But see you guys next week. Check us out on thegruelingtruth.net. Again, follow us on Twitter for all the shows that Troy and I do. We will see you next Monday.